Yeah, so we're here to talk about deployment, and I think I just wanted to put like a really fine point on it. Deployment is how you as vendors figure out how to get value into the hands of your customers in a mechanism that meets them where they want to be to receive that. And ideally, in terms of like the last panel, monetize that in a way that's beneficial to you. And so I think we should start today just by running through. Historically, there's been a couple different models of deployment, whether it's on-premise. There was a brief period of delusionalness in the 90s with ASPs. We don't talk about that anymore. And then SaaS, of course, which we're, some would say, in the golden age of SaaS right now. So we could just run through, I guess start with Joe and go down and what you do for deployment, what the models you use.
Yeah, so we help enterprises make best use of Kubernetes, and so a lot of what we're doing is just on the ground with field engineers, helping them and training, helping them understand and run Kubernetes, providing tool sets there. So that's really teaching somebody to fish type of thing. But then we're also building out complementary services, and we're still pretty early on with that journey, and we're dealing with really big companies, so we're still evaluating the sort of spectrum of choices from pure SaaS to shipping people's bits and everything in between.
Yeah, so even some exploration going on right now. So this panel will be useful to you.
I'm listening. I want to see what these folks say.
I'm Edith. I'm CEO and co-founder of LaunchDarkly. We are a feature management platform. So we're primarily helping SaaS and IT companies manage getting their own features to customers. So kind of by definition, we started off as SaaS. So we have customers like, for example, HashiCorp is a customer. And we have customers like Meetup who use us to say, hey, this is what features that people get in a very agile, quick environment. So by necessity, we were SaaS. That's just what we started as.
Right.
Cool. And so at HashiCorp, we have a number of open source tools, and we have enterprise variants of a subset of those tools. And we deliver, it sort of varies by tool, but we deliver, I'll break it down by revenue. That's the easiest way to do it. About 90% of our revenue today comes from on-premise installations. And when I say on-premise, it could mean bare metal, or it could just mean private VPC, but you are sort of managing it. And then another sort of less than, or 10%-ish is SaaS. We do have a SaaS offering. That's growing. And then more recently, but too early to talk about revenue numbers, is we've been working with MSPs as well and looking at our own managed services, single tenant. So I laugh because we end up doing everything.
Yeah,
at some point.
The whole basket.
That's kind of where we're headed to, yeah.
So just a quick timeline on that. I mean, with the open source background, naively it seems like the on-prem would be kind of the first move. Did you start, is the SaaS relatively new for you?
Yeah, right. So our first move was on-prem, because with open source, we're used to delivering just like packages and binaries to people. So it was fairly straightforward to deliver the on-prem. I would say that the hard parts for us were the non-technical parts.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's interesting because, so Edith, I think one thing, we were talking, so there are different classes of SaaS applications. So there's some where we're just like wrapping up business logic in front of a database. It's kind of conceptually easy to package that up and in shrink wrap. LaunchDarkly is not one of those, right?
At its most basic, you could think of us as a set of SDKs, which our customers actually install in their own software. And then we have a centralized dashboard where their developers, product managers, marketers, customer success are controlling functionality. So I guess you could say in some sense we do have an on-prem in that we have a very lightweight SDK that people have to use.
Yep, an edge piece.
Yeah, but the heart of it is really our own dashboarding, which is in the cloud.
With your 90% of revenue on-prem, like what's the biggest challenge of that model for you?
The biggest model is kind of the variety of the installation platforms that we're going on. Everyone always says during the sales process, like, "Oh, we're normal. It's a normal. it's an easy network layout."
I like to say every enterprise is their own little Galapagos island.
Yeah, but they think it's normal. It's like, "Oh, our disks are reliable. Everything's good. It's easy. It's just Linux or something." And it's, I mean, almost never the case. Like, there's almost always something that's weird. That's been hard. And then the product development gets affected quite a bit too, because on-premise customers don't want to update.
Yeah.
updating is like a thing they have to plan for and do it. And if something's working, why change it, right? If it's working for them. So it's really hard to get them to update. And so you want to move in a more agile fashion. You want to ship features every week or something. And then on the flip side, you have paying customers being like, please don't ship any features. Like, please stop. And so it's funny because it's kind of counterintuitive, but our contracts actually have, clauses that say you basically not only lose support, but you lose your license to the software if you don't stay within a certain like release period, right? A support period.
So what's that, I guess you think about like long-term support. What's your like LTS term typically?
Right now it's really short, and that's because we say no. So a good tip to you is just try saying no. We'll get customers that come to us say, we want 3 years of LTS support. No. Okay. Like that's the end of that. And so, and our current LTS is 1 year. So it's just, which is really short. That's not going to last that much longer. But I think it's really important early on in a startup's life to try to bring that LTS down as short as possible because we've had some features we've deprecated, and the fact that you can't actually code remove a feature for what turns out to be effectively 2 years is really painful.
So I have all this scar tissue of working on, as an engineering manager in the 2000s, and it was this immense tax on every release. Mm-hmm. And it was a tax in multiple ways. It was that we had to do a supported platform matrix.
Oh, yeah.
Of just, hey, what databases and app servers can you install this on? And what crazy Sybase version is this one big customer running? Yep. That's its own tax.
Kerberos was mentioned earlier.
And then the other tax of just like you start to accrue, I would even say technical debt of does this old feature work with the new feature?
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to do this cool new thing that your new customers are asking for, and there's one customer like desperately clinging to this thing where you're like, please God no.
Yeah, and that realizes itself as real cost to the vendor because you usually have to maintain that test matrix internally. So. We're a cloud-ish company, I guess, but we have, in our office, we have physical racks of servers with like clunky pieces of hardware that our customers sent us just to do validation.
Yeah, and it just adds up to so much tax on every release that you're like, oh, how is it really that hard to test 3 database versions versus 2 app servers? And it's like, yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, one of the things so 100% of our revenue is what we call behind the firewall, either about half AWS, half, on-prem. And one of the arguments we use with customers to stay up to date, because, and we support, N-1 with Kubernetes right now. So that's like a 6-month window. And so we really want folks to get on that train, is that they get to benefit from the larger ecosystem. Right, so as and it depends on sort of what you're shipping, but if there's a set of tools, if there's other things that they want to integrate, if they get too far behind, then they get stranded, and that's one of the reasons why they're looking to move to Kubernetes is so they can take advantage of that ecosystem. So we really help them help themselves in that way.
Yeah, and the getting behind is so dangerous, like because what you said about people who are on an old version, it gets more and more risky when they try to upgrade.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is because we're an open source company, we can't control the non-customers. And so we'll get someone who now wants to become a customer, and we realize they're on a 3-year-old version. So it kind of forces us to have those upgrade paths ready, which sucks. There's no nice way about it.
So there definitely seems to be like a range of preferences, right, across different. And I'm curious, like Joe, in your conversations, have you found that like verticals impact more than other? I mean, I would just assume that like healthcare or fintech. We talk at Heavybit a lot what we call a hipster enterprise. For our enterprise-facing companies, like selling to Airbnb or Pinterest or Lyft is different than selling to Bank of America.
Yeah, so we concentrate on big companies that are not sort of like tech-forward West Coast companies, because we want to train ourselves on how to actually deliver to sort of mainstream enterprises. And they still have a lot. Even cloud is a force of nature. It's going to happen. SaaS, IaaS, whatever, it's going to happen. But I think it's going to take longer than I think a lot of folks in this world, on this side of the country, tend to think. And so you have to be flexible about just sort of meeting customers where they are, helping them along with that journey. And it's painful. The support, we have a support matrix. It's not fun.
No.
But I think it's something now, like we are also building out sort of, complements. And so I view like whether we do that as SaaS or on-prem, the sort of proprietary complements to Kubernetes, like that's a negotiation with your customers, right? What you want to do is say, hey, we're going to do SaaS, we're going to ship every week, suck it up. What they want is something that's going to have all the latest features and never change, and they'll never have to upgrade. It's like physically impossible. And so it's a negotiation, and it's changing over time as people get more and more comfortable with this. And so we're definitely seeing that shift.
Yeah, and Edith, on the SaaS side, so someone mentioned something I did want to ask about, but in the last panel, single tenant instances, which is kind of like spiritual descendant of the ASPs, except the vendors are agreeing to do this. So, with LaunchDarkly being SaaS only, do you have any of these in the wild?
Yes. So to continue on what Joe Beda was saying, we have a double Joe. I don't know if anybody has noticed this. A lot of our customers are really large enterprises that are coming to us, and one of my favorite quotes I heard yesterday is they're coming to us for the harmony between agility and stability.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point,
you should tweet that. I'm sure you already have.
So they're coming to us because they say, hey, we're getting left behind by all the hipster companies. We don't want to be the stodgy hotel chain where Airbnb is worth billions of dollars. We don't want to be the stodgy bank where PayPal is worth billions of dollars. So they know that they have to move faster. It's not 2004 anymore where everybody saw software as a cost center to cut. So usually they're coming to us when they're somewhere in a transformation we're moving from our data centers, we're moving to cloud, we need to move faster, but we still need to do it very stably, and they're looking to a vendor like LaunchDarkly to help them with it. Where single instances come into this is sometimes we do have extremely large customers who say, I really, really, really need a single instance, and usually the reasons are pretty much exactly what Mariana gave. Regulatory compliance, a lot of PII, really spiky workloads that are just unpredictable, and they just really want their own instance. Our usual first comeback is we say, hey, we serve 40 billion flags a day, and that's billion with a B. Everybody likes to think they're huge, but we're actually serving customers like Fubo.tv, which is the #1 sports app. We're powering Atlassian, we power Hashi. We can handle your workload. If they continue and say, hey, we really want this private instance, we usually quote them the price, and then their eyes kind of go like, oh, you know what? SaaS is just dandy.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good now. So one thing's interesting when people talk about on-premise in 2018, and Mitchell, I'd be interested in how often does on-premise mean like what you would think of like a traditional air-gapped, no network connections or heavily firewalled data center, or actually just like, hey, we have our own VPC on Amazon that's on-premise?
For us, it's pretty split, I would say. We still do quite a lot of traditional on-prem, like physical on-prem, but I would say that's skewed with our company a bit because we sell a lot of security software with Vault. And so the way a lot of people are deploying Vault is they're in the cloud or they're on Kubernetes or something, but they still want their primary Vault cluster. One of the enterprise features they're buying from us with Vault is multi-region, but they want the primary Vault cluster, in a physical, not air-gapped usually, but in a physical sort of location. So that breaks down, but I think it's just a matter of time before it all kind of moves to private VPCs. So we've designed everything to assume VPC, and if you do that, it kind of scales down just fine.
Yeah. And another thing I want to get some people's opinions on, because I have opinions. Multi-cloud is a word that, just kind of gets me going, because it is a thing. I don't think it means what most people mean when they say it. So in terms of like deployment targets, like what does multi-cloud actually mean for you? What do you see in the wild? Joe, you're talking to people who are multi-cloud?
Yeah, well, so the first thing to recognize is, when you're a startup, your failure mode is that you run out of money and nobody cares, right? When you're a big company, you have different risks that you actually, deal with. And so multi-cloud, ends up being a risk mitigation type of thing. And so like pretty much all of our customers, they don't want to necessarily run on other clouds, but they want to have the option to run on other clouds. They want to know that, hey, it's going to be a 2-3 month process to actually migrate some stuff over. It's going to be painful, but we can do it, versus let's rewrite our app. It's going to be a 3-year process to actually move stuff over. For us, because we're in this position where we know that the stuff that we're building, some of it's going to, we're going to run ourselves in a multi-tenant way. Some of the stuff that we're actually, going to be running behind the firewall for folks. We're keeping, our stuff as sort of plain Jane as possible. We're really not using fancy stuff, regular old VMs, run-of-the-mill databases as much as we possibly can so that we have that flexibility.
Got it. Mitchell, you have multi-cloud customers. What do they actually look like?
Yeah, so as of today, I think roughly 100 out of the Fortune 500 are paying customers, and out of those 100, 99 or 100 are multi-cloud. And the first thing I always say when I say multi-cloud is there's 4 totally distinct definitions of multi-cloud. There's workload portability, which is extremely rare. That means you could run your app on any cloud. That's almost never true. There's workflow portability, which means that the way you deploy an app to Amazon is the same tools and process for a developer as the way you deploy it to Azure. That's very often true. There's traffic portability, which means that depending on a geographic region, you're going to a different cloud provider. It's close, but not the same as workload portability. That's semi-rare, but more common. And then there's data portability, which means that your actual data can move clouds, which is almost never because speed of light, right? And so those are the 4 things. Workflow portability is what we sell as a company, and it's really, really common in enterprises in particular. If only the most basic reason is M&A. When a big company is acquiring another company and that company has chosen to be on Google and your company has chosen to be on Amazon, the big company, as part of the M&A process, is not going to price in an infrastructure switch from Google to Amazon. They're gonna say, you stay on Google, we're going to stay on Amazon, and let's do our own thing. Yeah. And so you end up with sort of business unit level splits between clouds. So there's no workload portability. They're separate apps. They're totally siloed. The other thing we see is sort of the clouds are now starting to differentiate on terms of best-in-class ML versus best-in-class serverless versus various different high-level features. And so some teams, even in the same view, want to leverage different technologies. And so we're seeing that a lot. But for the most part, it's pretty much everywhere. And especially if you think about the on-prem as a cloud, more or less, if you just bucket into that, because the nature of enterprises is that any sort of paradigm transformation, mainframe to servers, servers to VMs, VMs to containers, containers to schedulers, and schedulers serverless, all these different transformations are probably 10 years, and the 10 years overlap. So they're always in a state of heterogeneity. And so even if they have these nice new teams that are in a fully super Kubernetes sort of workload, they also have these teams that are still in their last 2 years of the server VM switch. And so you either as a vendor say, we don't help you with that, and you maybe lower your impact and value to the company, or you try to figure out a way to make it work.
Got it. And your thoughts?
So yeah, I think it's longer than 10 years. Mainframes are still a growing business for IBM. They're making a lot of money on that stuff. And then the other point is on the sort of multi-cloud data. There are scenarios where big companies, I'm thinking movie studios, they'll actually back up stuff to multiple clouds because they don't trust those 8 nines or whatever of durability that Amazon promises.
Yep.
Because Black Swan events and such.
Yeah. Edith, feature flags, which near and dear to my heart.
Mine too.
Do you find, just to kind of take an interesting spin, as a SaaS hosted in the cloud, SaaS offering, do you find customers managing features in on-prem products with feature flags?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you should just talk about how you use us.
No, you go.
Yeah. You go.
Okay, well, I'll just say that feature flags are how I mentioned that problem earlier of our on-prem customers don't want to be upgraded too fast. So we actually deliver features quickly. We just turn them off for the
You just hide them from them?
Yeah.
Interesting.
They're getting them. They just, as long, what they don't see.
They're deployed, they're not released.
Right. And they're not running actual runtime components. So
Yeah, we have a lot of customers who use us basically to manage their own customers. So if they've signed a contract and this customer says, it's very common to say, we do a lot of training on this UI, I do not want new features. Just and stop. Even because there might be something as stringent as there's union rules. If you're, say, an airline about how often you could change a UI.
Right.
So they'll have features and then they'll say, we are going to do a training on this date, and that's the date we want to turn them on.
They're not up on continuous delivery? And
It's the developers who want it. The
Yeah.
developers at these customers are championing at the bit. They're churning out features, and then what they really love feature flags is that the developers can move super quickly, and then use the feature flags to match with the rest of the org. So,
Got
for
it.
example, they can build a feature and then plan all the training.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing is kind of overlaps with what the last panel was talking about SLAs, is you can use feature flags actually to implement a lot of those premium support offerings or UIs that you give people, right? Like they opt into that platinum plan and you toggle the flag on their account and they get all the goodies.
Yep.
I think a fun one of enterprise in particular is when you realize the world isn't super flat and there's like really weird laws in different
Yeah.
countries. We actually don't use LaunchDarkly for this, but we use feature flags. For example, when we sell Vault in China, we actually have to disable a
Yeah.
bunch of basically encryption algorithms. They don't allow them by law there. And same thing, right? You have to have all these little featured configurables that are like different regions can do different things with your software.
Yeah, another use case like that is some customers will say like, I'm a bank, do not give me this feature until it has been battle hardened with 98% of your other customers.
Yep.
Yeah. Switching gears a little, something I definitely want to make sure we talk about today, I think that's important for enterprise sales, is channels, right? There's a bunch of different kind of channels. So I think we could start with, Mitchell, you mentioned MSP.
Mhm.
And I think, first of all, how many people here actually know what an MSP is? Okay, that's all right. I think you still define it, and then like how that works in the HashiCorp's strategy for delivery.
Sure. So when you sort of get past the hipster enterprises, so like the hipster enterprises are like the Airbnbs, Netflix, those of the world. They want to run it themselves, which is there. And then you get sort of more to the billion-dollar beauty product business in the middle of Texas type enterprise. They want it on-prem, but they super don't want to run it themselves, and they don't want a SaaS. And so they want something in the middle. And an MSP is a managed service provider, which is a business basically dedicated to running other people's software for you on other people's premises. So that's what an MSP is.
Right, and as in a channel, because there are tens of thousands of these, right? Then if they get comfortable with your solution, I mean, they can effectively act as resellers.
Yeah, definitely.
Or at least you can draft off, they'll have existing procurement paper in place.
So there's pros and cons, which is that like as a vendor, you really want to control the paper and be the relationship with the customer. And some MSPs are resellers, some are not resellers. So some you could bring in after the fact of your own paper and they have their own separate service agreement. But yeah, there's pros and cons there.
Yeah, and then another, not variant, but Joe, I'm curious if the people you're working with use VARs, right, or value-added resellers.
Yeah, I mean, we're not there yet. So we still want to control that experience. There's still a lot of dealing with those Galapagos Islands out there. But I think as your deployment gets more turnkey, as you understand the patterns, I think it makes sense to be able to bring in VARs or SIs and be able to have them essentially extend your reach.
Right. And generally they tend to add, particularly when we're going back to verticals, like they will specialize in a vertical, right? And
They speak the lingo.
They speak the lingo. They know the things that matter to the buyers in that vertical.
They're usually like highly specialized. Like it'll be like
Yes.
AWS only with security only and finance only.
Right.
That's how big that market is. Like they could do that and still be $1 billion business.
Yeah, and some of the big ones, I know some companies literally have open budget with it. So when you're talking about, we haven't even talked about budgeting cycles. This isn't a procurement panel, but they'll have actual budget set aside that you don't have to go through budgeting. You can just go straight into that. So
Yeah, we've done that where it's like, hey, we want to get you through procurement, but it takes forever. So just give 5% to these folks and we'll make it happen.
and all the problems go away.
Yeah,
Not racketeering at all.
We've definitely had, I mean, we don't discount, but we've had people who say like, it was just a large sporting good company who said, we want to buy you, we're just not set up to purchase from you. Can you sell to this person who will mark it up 2 times? We're like, okay.
Yep.
That works. Yeah, interesting. Other channels. So on go the way other end of the spectrum, there's like the Heroku add-ons marketplace. Amazon has, although it's been around for a while, I think especially in the last year or two, they've been doing a lot of, they're clearly starting to invest in their marketplace. Are you seeing, those tend to be more on the self-serve side or bottoms up inside? Are you seeing any enterprise adoption from like large Amazon accounts going through the marketplace?
It really varies by cloud for us, and I don't really want to call anyone out, so I'll say like I just won't name them. But there's some cloud marketplaces that are really useless. They're like demo only, self-serve type things. There's other cloud marketplaces where I think they do a better job of integrating it into like you could better control the control panel flow and the billing style and bring your own like BYOL, bring your own license for enterprise software. That we've seen a little better adoption, but it's not as strong as direct sales.
Got
And
it. Yeah.
marketplaces are kind of rough because you have that middleman between you, the cloud. You really want to have that direct relationship with the customer because, as the previous panel talked about, like when you have TAMs and various SLAs and so on, you really want that direct connection.
It really depends on who your buyer is. Like if you're selling more, or if your buyers are VP engineering, they don't want to just do a point-click route. They actually want a little bit more white glove service. They want some demos. They want some help.
Yeah, I would say in large part I view marketplaces as sort of like vendor introduction services, right? It's a good way for them to see what's there, and then they'll short circuit the marketplace to really do the deal. There's other programs that the clouds offer. If if you can help bring somebody on and that drives more spend on their platform, they'll give you a cut of that, right? So there's these channel programs that the various clouds offer because their goal is to just land grab as many sort of cycles and bytes and packets as possible. If you can help do that, they'll cut you in on some of the profits there, and so those can be really, really good channels.
There's actually a really cool technical thing too. It's like a lot of people on clouds will firewall off so you can't phone home and know if someone's running your software, right? So we have that problem too. It's like we will do a phone home just to track like number of runs. It's totally anonymous, but there'll be firewalls. If you could get partnerships with a lot of these cloud platforms, and we have them with all of them, they all have local hypervisor servers running, and you could actually set it up so you could ping that. It's really hard to block that, and the cloud provider will tell us how many are running. So we could actually go to them and they say, you ran on 200,000 cores this month, and even if the network's off, you can know that.
That's interesting. Well, it sounds like you definitely need to do your diligence on the different programs. I think we're pretty much at time, so I want to do just a quick fire. We'll go right down one piece of advice for people who are thinking about deploying software in the enterprise. We'll start with you, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say meet customers where they are, right? Don't write letters from the future going like, here's this beautiful thing, right? Instead, recognize that you're going to be much more successful if you bring folks with you.
Yeah, we were unexpectedly enterprise. We thought we were going to be a very bottoms-up sale, and one of our first big sales was 5 figures, and it was like this aha of like, hey, we're actually solving a big company problem. We need to grow up very quickly. So realize who your buyers are, and I'll echo what Joe said. If you're getting pulled up market, go there.
My advice would be a lot of the problems with selling to enterprise are non-technical, so focus on customer success, TAMs, solutions engineers, sales engineers, because they're going to be working realistically for 4 to 6 months before any bits server.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.